Alright, this is a video on how to use Studio One Prime, the free version. It has some limitations, but it has enough features to do a pretty good job on a song. You can multi-track, it has MIDI instrumentation and all that. Today we're going to focus on just doing an audio track, adding any effects we need and mixing it down. So when you first start it up, you'll see here you've got a recent file list. This was one of my attempts that I messed up. You can switch back and forth between the song mode and the start screen right here with these buttons. I'm not going to try to go into a lot of great detail today, just how to get it up and running and how to actually do it without getting into advanced editing, advanced features and all that. So you want to be sure your sound card is showing and that it's working properly. You can choose it from a list if it's not showing, and you can set the parameters for it. I would leave everything at default. If it's working fine, leave it alone. So at any rate, that's where you do that. You can click right here on your setup icon, and so once you got your sound card running, give it a shot. Go to create a new song. We'll just call this one Final Toot, because hopefully I won't mess up on this one. It's already set for the CD quality or format for the audio, so just kind of leave it where it is. You can, if you want a high quality recording for other purposes, you can certainly make your adjustments here and do that, but I'm running quite a bit of software to make this capture, so I'm leaving it as low as I can to relieve some of the load on the computer. So now we're in the song. We hit OK and we're in the song. You've got all of your instruments are available over here: guitar, drums, keyboards, strings, synthesizers. All of that are over here in the instrument section. And you've also got a loop library, and we won't get into that, but if you want to make a quick and dirty drum track, you can use loops to do that. For the most part, we're not going to worry too much about what's over here because we're going to work strictly with an audio track. So I'm going to close the browser to give more room out here. If you notice, like most software, if you hover over an icon, it'll tell you what it does. This is kind of an arrow tool. It's a general move things around, select things, and so forth. And I'm not going to get into great details here. This is your split tool, but mousing over tells you what it is. So if you're trying to figure out what you're going to do and how to do it, you can use the mouse over a lot and help you to figure out. This is like the master mute, to mute everything at one time. Each section will have its own mute and solos and all that. Your options here, and you can play with those options. That's just more like how do you want to interface with it. You've got a track list, off and on, inspector, off and on. So those are the kinds of things you can learn. You don't need to know all that to do it, so do the job. So right click menu shows you all the options you got in a given window. Out here in the main window you got these as opposed to these in the track window. Anytime you're going to get ready to do something, try the right click, see if it's there in those options. It's just faster than going up through the menu system. So adding a track can be done here with a right click, and you can select what exactly you want to add, or you can use this and set it manually. So this is going to be the flute track, so it's already named flute from a future attempt that I did. It's an audio type. You could do instrument or automation. We're doing audio today. You can set the color. If you like a certain color, you can use whatever color appeals to you. I like soft colors, and blue is good. The input, left or right, that can all be adjusted after you create the track as well. So now we have the track. If you look, you can move that mouse when it changes. You can grab it and pull it down, make the track larger to a certain extent. I like it just enough to see the waveform well. Okay, so now we got the mute for the track itself as opposed to all tracks. This mutes only the track you're working with. That's the solo button. If you've got 9 tracks or 20 tracks, you want to hear just one, you hit the solo button. This is the record arm button. This is the monitor button. This just tells you what kind of track it is, waveform, audio track or instrument track, whatever it is. You can set your inputs here as well, like input left and right, input left only. You can also pop it down here. You can also get back in and set up your card if it isn't working right. So the way you tell if your card's working right is you arm it, and now you'll see I've got a signal. When I talk, it comes up there. There's a small amount of echo that's introduced because of latency. You can turn that off by not monitoring the output of the track, but rather just the input. It's so slight here, it really doesn't affect anything as far as being able to play and not feel out of time. So I guess with that said, we're ready to arm we've got the track armed. Down here is your playback controls: stop, rewind, start, record, loop setting, and all of that. This is your master record. If you notice, it says you can also hit the numpad asterisk to start the recording itself. So I'm going to get my flute and see what we can do. Using a D minor pine flute that I made. I call it my cougar flute because it has a cougar fetish on it. Make sure we got a good sound with it. Looks pretty good. My level could be a little hotter, but I don't want a lot of background noise. So we'll start it recording and do a few seconds here. I did not follow my recommendation that you don't move after your last note for a couple of seconds so you don't get some unwanted sounds in your clip. Right here you can see you got a slider. This slider you can go in and out, zoom in closer, out, see the whole wave, whatever you need to do. So you can also just click on the large and smaller and just do it in increments. So first thing I want to do is some basic editing. I want to disarm the recording. I want to use my split tool, and I want to go to as high a resolution as I can support here, and turn off snapping. Now I can get right up close to my waveform, and I'm going to go in a little closer. I can get right up close to my waveform and split it, and then go back to this tool, and I can get rid of that silence. Now I can take the whole track and move it forwards. I'm not going to do any other tracks, so I don't need to have some lead time for getting settled with my instrument, so I'm just going to move it forward. I just did that by clicking and dragging, left click and drag. Now we'll take a listen to it. Nice and clean, but it's not loud enough. So we'll use our right click menu, it's a good friend. Normalize audio is Alt-N, or click on, right click and select it. Now we have it playing as loud as it will play without overdriving at the highest amplitude. Take a listen. Any popping you hear is the audio engine. It's not in the recording itself. I've got a lot of software running to do the video recording, so it's popping for that reason. You won't hear it in the final mix down, and that may be the case on your own computer at home. You may hear some popping, but it's not in the audio itself. unless your system is just not able to handle it. But at any rate, we got a nice sound. Um, let's go down to the end here and trim off anything at the end that we don't want on there. So we can get our split tool again, get right up close and cut it off, and then delete that at the end. Now, in order to make mixing and all that easier, we're just going to set a loop point so that we don't have to keep stopping and rewinding. So if you take your selection tool, your arrow tool, and go up here and get into the ruler area, if you go slightly up into that little gray strip, it'll turn to a pencil. Then you left click and drag to the left, and that's setting a region. Go all the way to the front. Now we have a region set. I'll zoom out here so I can see the whole region. And for right now, I just wanted it set fairly close because I'm just going to be editing and setting the effects and all that. So we have a recorded track, and we've got it maximized as far as, or normalized, so the volume is as good as it can be. We're going to save our work so we don't have errors or have to start over if something crashes. Now that we have the region in place, we can enable it as a loop region by clicking this button, and I'm sure there's a hotkey for it, and numpad / would do it as well. Now it's turned blue, so when it plays it will loop, and I'll show you. I'll just start out here and get it playing. You can use your space bar to start and stop the playback, and it'll say right here, enter will start as well, but so does the space bar. Okay, so we're ready to clean it up, mix it, and get it ready to go. So we go down here to the Mix tab, and we can size this window by moving that mouse until it, there we go, and then we can grab it and pull it up. I like to keep the waveform showing so I can see where I'm at in the song. And the mixing, it's like a mixer board, hardware board that you would have if you were mixing sound in a studio or in a concert setting running the sound. You got your volume slider here, and you got the mute button, solo button, and record arm button, same ones that are up here in this view. This is just a different way of displaying this, so easy enough to figure that out. If you have 5 tracks, you'll have 5 sliders showing up here, but today we're working with just one. Alright, so we need to add a little EQ to this. It doesn't sound as good as I'd like it to sound. The rule I follow is if I have to do any extreme EQing, it's time to re-record the track, because it needs to be recorded so that when you play it back it sounds good. And you might want to just tweak it a little bit, but if you have to try and alter the way it sounds using extreme EQing, then you should start over. And that's just my own philosophy, because you can't create something that doesn't exist. So this little button right here pops open for your inserts and sends, and you can also double click to do the same thing. EQing, I want to apply it to the sound itself, so I'm going to put it on the track as opposed to out in a separate bus. So I hit the little plus button, and we'll go down here to channel strip. In the free version, I can't seem to get the Pro EQ to load into a track and be accessible. I think it may be just because it's the free version. But at any rate, this is a 3-band parametric EQ, so it works pretty well. You've got different settings here, you know, instruments, piano, sax. They're kind of preset to make those instruments sound well. You've got one for vocals, and presets are nice, but I like to just do what I need to do, because my instruments, you know, the flutes that we have, they tend to be a personalized instrument, and they sound a certain way, and you can't really make a preset for a flute, because no 2 flutes really sound the same unless you get the same flute from the same maker, that kind of thing. So anyway, enough said on that. So the way you got your EQ in place, and we just started playing back and make adjustments. You can do that by moving these these circles. Okay, or you can go up or down, left or right. Same thing with the knob. You can go up or down with the knob and left or right. That just tells you where the center of the adjustment is in the frequency span. So we'll start it looping and we'll adjust the flute to make it sound good. I like to remove everything below 60 hertz. You can't hear it anyway, so you might as well take it out. It gives you more overhead so you can get a better overall volume of your song without having problems. So get rid of the bottom end with this low pass filter here, low cut. And you can do a little compression if you want. It just helps to keep the peaks under control. All I'm doing here is adding some brightness. And I'm trying to, there's a range around 385, 400 or so that tends to sound kind of in a barrel, so I try to cut that a little bit. My rule of thumb is if I have to go over 6 decibels on an adjustment, I've not recorded it well and I need to start over. So we'll just keep working with this and see what I get. If it's not quite loud enough, you can add the gain. Okay, so I'm not saying that this is the ideal setting for a flute. I'm just saying that this works out pretty well. You can also do side chaining, and that's more advanced, so I'll get into that in a future tutorial. For now, we've got it EQ'd. So now let's add some reverb. So I don't want to add it to the track. I want to be able to keep the dry sound. If you think about being out in the near a canyon somewhere or anywhere you're playing, what is the closest thing to your ears? And it's the flute in your hands. Okay, so that's going to be the dominant sound that you hear in the natural. Okay, so I've heard some guys, and I'm not trying to ditch anybody, but they put so much reverb on their flute that you can't even tell what the actual flute really sounds like. It's all buried in a sea of reverberation that just echoes on and on. It gets overtones, it gets all jumbled, and to me it just sounds horrible. You know, you pay hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars for a good quality flute and then bury it in sound effects. The flute itself sounds sweet when you play it live, so why would you want to get rid of the live sound and put it into an artificial realm? That's just my philosophy on it. So I always add my effects separately and control how much I bring in, and I never take away the actual dry sound of the flute. So I'm going to add an effects channel, use that right-click menu, add effects. Now I have an effects channel and I can put an insert on it, and that would be, we'll start with reverb and we'll take a listen. There is no reverb sound. That's because we haven't told this track to send it out to the reverb unit. So that's what this sends area is for. You add with this plus sign to the effects 1 area. Now you're going to hear reverb. It'll be way too much. And to me, that's not a very pleasant reverb. That's kind of almost a 50s rock, short slap delay sound. So I like a larger room. So I like to almost maximize this thing out. And I turn the dampening down. Dampening controls how long it reverberates. Essentially, how long is it going to keep reverberating before it drops to no reverb at all. So I like to turn this down, start it looping, and then bring it up till it sounds pleasant. So here we go. Now I can hear the reverb, and it kind of keeps going quite a bit. So I like to limit that to maybe 2 seconds. In music, 2 seconds can be a long time. And if you have one tone that's continuing to ring through the reverb, and you're playing another tone and another tone, pretty soon you've got all of this reverberation at different tones than the tone you're actually playing, and it starts to sound bad. So set it to taste. How fast are you playing? If you're doing long pauses and long notes, you can probably get by with letting that reverb go on for as long as you want. But if you have a break and then you start and notes are closer together, you want to start dampening that reverb a little bit. That's my philosophy on it. So I'm going to start it and bring up the dampening. So I brought it up. I wait for a quiet spot. If the dampening if the reverb is almost gone by the time the next note starts, that's pretty good in my opinion. So that's kind of where I like to set that. Maybe you could use a little more. Okay, so we got a decent sounding reverb. I can still hear the sweetness of the original track. It's not lost in the reverb, so that's good. Now we want to set our echo, because maybe we're out by in a canyon and we've got some hard surfaces that are going to create echoes. So in order to set that well, I'm going to turn this one off with this little power button right here, so I don't hear the reverb. I'm going to add another effects channel, and I'm going to insert the beat delay. Then I need to go back here and make sure that I have a send going to the second effects, and I don't want to have it too awful strong, but we'll just take a listen at default and see what it sounds like. So that's a very fast echo, a very strong echo. It overpowers the flute and it sounds like a jumbled mess. So I like a little bit slower delay, so let's turn this clear off and let's bring this up. Right now it's a quarter measure or quarter bar. So that's kind of like the length of a quarter note in the distance between the echoes. So I want to bring that out to maybe 1 bar. 1 bar is probably okay. Feedback tends to be how long it echoes. It may be 2 echoes, 3 echoes, and then it dies away. So you got to kind of work with how much you're sending and how long it echoes, and just kind of, you can set some of the width, stereo versus mono, cross delay. I'm not sure exactly on that. You can also have a ping factor so that one side delays a little different than the other side. And you can control your cuts here, so you don't want a lot of lows in the echo. It tends to muddy up the mix. High cut, I don't know if you even need to use the high cut. It's kind of to taste, So again, we're going to start it going, and we're going to bring in the echo till it sounds nice, make any adjustments we need, keep it looping. that's dying off fairly fast, but not as fast as I'd like it to. So I'm going to drop this down fairly low. And I'll just start it and stop it so I can listen. That's got two strong ones. And that might be just a little bit long. So let's try half. That sounds better. Okay, so it's not interfering with the main melody line. It's there and it's fairly strong, but it's not interfering. I'm going to back it off just a little bit. And I'm going to bring the reverb back in and listen to them both together and see how they sound. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. If I were going to have guitar and bass, excuse me, and drums and things like that, it would affect how much of this reverb I'd want to use. Also, the EQing, the more instruments you have, the more complex the EQ job becomes. If you have overlapping frequencies in your different instruments, they tend to multiply or add, and you get concentrations at a certain frequency. It can be irritating, and that's usually dealt with in the mastering process, but you can minimize that by EQing each instrument, figure out where the overlap is, and maybe it's the bass drum and the kick drum, or the bass guitar and the kick drum, I mean. Maybe you need to drop some of the lows off of one of those to compensate for that. That's part of the art of mixing, and it gets into the advanced, which I'm not going to go into today. But so we've got a decent sounding track. Now we want to make sure, let's turn off looping, we want to make sure that the echo and reverb die before the song stops. So let's move this out and take a listen how long it plays out. That's not too bad at 17. I'm going to go out to 17 and a half. I don't want to cut that off midstream. I don't want to have an abrupt stopping of the sound. Let's listen again. So that's not bad there at all. It's nice and quiet when it's done. So this song is ready to send on its way. So we have our start and stop as defined by the loop region here. And so all we need to do at this point is save our work in case something goes wrong. Now we go to the song menu and go down to export mix down. Here we can set where it's going to go, and I like to put it on the desktop and then file it later in a specific folder. Easy to find on the desktop. You can give it a file name here, final mix, whatever your title of the song is, Wayward, whatever it is. Dance of Tears. We'll just call it that for what the heck. And then wave file. You got lossless FLAC. You got the different, types. The free version does not come with MP3 capabilities, so you would have to get something like Audacity and add the LAME or LAME MP3 encoder software. It's free. Both Audacity and the encoder are free, and you can post-edit the song. You can cut off, maximize it, whatever you need to do to it, trim it, and then export it out as an MP3 if you need to share it on the web or something like that. If you're going to put it to CD, 16-bit 44 hertz is what you want. That's required to produce a CD. And here, if we took time to set up start and stop markers and all that, we could select them here. We just have a loop marker, a loop region, so that's what is selected by default. So that works well. So once you've got all that set up, I'm not going to get into what all these do. They're pretty self-explanatory. Real-time processing, you will hear the song play as it's being rendered out, and that takes, it's in real time, so it takes longer. If you have that unchecked, it goes pretty doggone fast. This will close Studio One after it's exported. Again, I would encourage you to experiment on all of this stuff. Read through the manual when you get time and kind of familiarize yourself with what all these things do. They're not critical to just mixing it out, but they are there for a reason, I guess I would say. So assuming we don't have any overdriven areas, we'll see what happens here. If it's overdriven, it'll tell you. You can go back in and adjust the levels. Okay, so nothing was overdriven. The way I like to do it is I like to take one last listen before I do it, and I watch this meter right here for any overdriving, as well as any red overdriving indicators in the tracks. If nothing is overdriven, you're probably in pretty good shape. And you don't want your level of your song to be metering out down here. You want it as close to that zero as you can get it. So here we go. I could have made that a little stronger on the mix down before I sent it out. So that's how you do it. We started from opening it up, creating a song. We made sure our sound card was set up. We added an audio track, armed it, recorded. We edited off the dead end at the beginning and the end, and then we went into the mixer mode. We added some EQ to the track, kind of sweetened it up a little bit. We added some reverb and echo and tweaked those to where they sounded pretty good, and then we selected the area to export and created our song. So once it's done, then you can burn it to a CD, you can convert it to an MP3, whatever you need to do for the end destination. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, you can private message me on Facebook in the group, or you can send me an email. Whatever method you want to ask your question, you can ask it in the group. I try not to clutter up the group wall with technical question and answer sessions, but we can certainly do that. This is just designed to get you up and running with recording your flute music. The reason I do this and do it for free is because I like to hear other people play the flute. If I can help you to realize your goals and get your music recorded and produced, then I get the spin-off benefit of being able to listen to your flute music. So it's a win-win situation. So with that said, thanks for listening, and I hope this was helpful.